How would you like to learn about a brand new book written 100 years ago? Today, we're talking about just such a book with Jeffrey Gitomer, the King of Sales. Are you ready? Welcome to episode number 129 of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a best-selling author and leadership thought leader for 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's book, The Long Distance Leader: Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Our guest today is Jeffrey Gitomer. If you've never heard of him, why not? Let me tell you about him now. And I've got to have my glasses on if you're watching because I got to make sure I get it all, and then I'll take my glasses off. Here we go. Jeffrey Gitomer is the author of the New York Times bestsellers, The Sales Bible, The Little Red Book of Selling, The Little Black Book of Connections, The Little Gold Book of Yes Attitude. Most of his books have been #1 bestsellers on Amazon, including Customer Satisfaction is Worthless and Customer Loyalty is Priceless. By the way, I think that may be your best, personally. The Patterson Principles of Selling, The Little Red Book of Sales Answers, Little Green Book of Getting Your Way, Little Platinum Book of Cha-Ching, Little Teal Book of Trust, Social Boom, Little Book of Leadership, and 21.5 Unbreakable Laws of Selling. I believe, Jeffrey, that all of them, with maybe one or two exceptions, are on my shelf. And not only that, but he's appeared on major bestseller lists more than 500 times and has sold millions of copies of his books. But today we're not really talking about any of that. We're talking about his brand new book that, as when you all hear this, will just be out. It's called The First Writings of Napoleon Hill, Truthful Living. Jeffrey, welcome.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be there. I would tell you that the challenge for me in doing this is that I did not do most of the writing Napoleon Hill did.
That's right. We'll dive into that. You and I as authors could talk about whether that was actually easier or harder, took longer or less, but we'll talk about the book. But for that, though, I want to ask you, I'm curious. I typically, Jeffrey, ask people about their journey, but I'm going to ask it differently to you. I'm going to say, so how did you become the reigning king of sales?
I found that the title had been vacated, actually never occupied. And so I grabbed it while the grabbing was good. I believe I own the kingofsales.com, but we don't use it for anything, just so nobody else would take it. But I had always vied with one of my best friends growing up to see if you'd lost a bet or you lost a deal or you couldn't throw the ping pong ball in the goldfish ping pong ball in the goldfish bowl, you had to call the other guy king. And I would get letters addressed to me as king and then show them to him, I'd subscribe to magazines with king as my title. And it was only natural. I'm amazing at making sales. I've made $1 million sales to Fortune 500 company CEOs on a cold call. So you get to that point and you realize that you have a prowess or you have an ability to engage other people, either with a value message or some compelling emotional message, and they buy from you. It's not about selling. It's about the customer buying. And so I've differentiated myself in that regard. And the easiest way to differentiate yourself is to call yourself king, because somebody has to dethrone you in order to be able to take over the title. So now I own the title. You want to come and dethrone me, then meet me on a platform with 1,000 people in the audience. We each put 10 grand in cash on the end of the platform. The audience votes at the end of the deal, and winner takes all. I'm willing. Just show up and strut your best stuff.
There you go, everybody. So I had to ask because I knew there'd be a great answer. So we are talking about a book that you said that you mostly didn't write. It was written by Napoleon Hill, and I'm going to hope that people listening know who he is. But if they don't, they're going to know by the time we're done.
Yeah, like, hello, how can you be in personal development or sales and not know? Even if you're in marketing, you still know who Napoleon Hill is.
And you ought to know, if you're in leadership, you ought to know pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
I certainly know my children know. Anyway, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about how has he, I know that you talk about it early in the book, how has the late great Napoleon Hill influenced your life?
Well, I began studying sales and personal development in 1972. I was in a group that was where the leader was the great Glenn W. Turner. His company was Dare to Be Great.
Yeah.
And I watched his film, Challenge to America, every day for 1 year. But we took the Napoleon Hill book to heart. The Strangest Secret and Napoleon Hill were like the benchmarks of the study. And every day somebody had to do a 1-chapter book report on Think and Grow Rich. Well, the book only has 15 chapters. And we did this for about 1 year. So I had gone through the book, literally read the book 10 times during the course of that year. And I became an expert at the book, but I also developed an impenetrable positive attitude that has stayed with me this 45 or 46 years, and it will never go away. Well, happenstance, I was introduced to the head of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And I'm a value first giver. It's a big thing with me. Give value first. And I put myself in a position where I was introduced to the Napoleon Hill Foundation president. And I said, hey, I got my attitude from Napoleon Hill. I'd love to do something for you to just say thanks. So I offered to do their newsletter, their email magazine. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'll do it on one condition. And they said, what's that? I said, that you never give me a dime. And because most people will offer the Napoleon Hill Foundation, I can make you a lot of money. All you have to do is give me some of yours.
Right.
You know, I love those bullshit lines. But I've done it now for about 15 years. Every Friday, no money. And a couple of years ago, they came to me and said, look, we found this, the first writings of Napoleon Hill. Would you like to edit, annotate, and, you know, put the book out together? We'll do it as a joint project. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. So fast forward 2 more years and the book comes out. Well, I'll explain how it started. It was a course that Napoleon Hill was teaching at the George Washington Institute in Chicago, which he founded. And it was a course in selling and how to sell advertising.
Yep.
It was called actually Truthful Advertising. And as I was reading it, at the back of everything, it was like a visit with Mr. Hill after the lesson. And this was, he wrote on personal development and positive attitude and goal setting and wealth and achievement. And I said, wait a minute, if I edit out the sales course, I have the fundamentals and the foundations of Think and Grow Rich 20 years before it was published. And I went nuts. So I did the deal. Amazon.com, the leaders of the free world, are publishing it, and they have a real publishing arm, not a post it and sell a few copies.
Yep.
But they're in competition with Random House and HarperCollins, and you know, if you know the publishing industry, you know that now Amazon controls it from word one to buy the book.
Yep. No
one does that. Not one person does that. Amazon controls the publishing industry. And I don't disrespect that. They were smart enough to do it. The book industry sat by idly, refused to build a website, refused to handle anything that was real distribution. Amazon has the distribution. And you can tell that it has the real distribution because Barnes & Noble doesn't like them and doesn't want their books in there, and the New York Times won't put them on the list, and you know, all the bullshit. Like it's like taxi cab companies suing Uber. What are you suing them for? Because they're kicking your ass? So that's the challenge, and I couldn't be prouder of this. This is an amazing accomplishment. My name appears on the same book with Napoleon Hill. It's, oh my God, it's unbelievable. And Amazon is excited about this. They are backing this to the hilt.
Okay, so that's good news. We can not worry about the New York Times bestseller list.
No, I don't care. I just want to sell a bunch of books. Right. Yeah, the New York Times bestseller list is predetermined. I'll just put it that way. They have their own algorithms. No one knows what they are. They keep it a secret. They keep everything a secret over there, including declining subscribers. But that's a whole other issue. So I want to go to the marketplace and present a value-driven book that will. I'm not going to say it's life-changing, but it is life enhancing. And when you get to a point where you can enhance somebody's life by making them see some of the words that are in there and realize that, hey, I'm doing this well, but hey, I'm not doing this well, you have to combine all of the elements in this book, and it will drive you to the bank, literally drive you to the bank. And as the person who has edited it and also read it aloud for, for brilliance, that was the hardest part, because it wasn't my book. It wasn't my words.
Right.
And it took me 3 or 4 times longer to read the book. Brilliant editing by the great Doug Branson. We sat here for hours and went through the book, and I go, oh God, I just screwed up. And oh God, I just screwed up. And oh God, I just screwed up. But we went back, and it's now perfect. And you'll love to listen to this book. You will love to read this book. But more importantly, you will love to put this book into your life. So here's what I did. I said, okay, this book is 100 years old. This writing is 100 years old. So I put an introduction to each lesson. That's what I wrote. I put some little notes inside of each chapter, so it sort of clarified some of the things. But then at the end of each chapter, I put an implementation plan so that you get to put this particular lesson, no matter what it is. Finish what you start. Success is up to you. Time is the most valuable asset that we have. Whatever it is, I put that into the back of each chapter so someone could stop and decide what they needed to do to implement each one of these 23 lessons. And I recommend that you read the book through and then start with lesson 1. And once a week, you put each one of these lessons into your life. And within 6 months, you got it rolling.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things I was going to talk about, is that you did annotate the book. You're certain your voice is in the book, but you're not the focus of the book, for sure, as we talked about.
Right.
And I do think that's one of the things that makes it more valuable. You mentioned that the writing is 100 years old. And by the way, for those of you, if you've joined us late for some reason, we're talking about the first writings of Napoleon Hill, Truthful Living, with Jeffrey Gitomer. And as not when he and I are talking, but when you're listening, it's available. In fact, you're listening to if you downloaded this the day it became available here, the book is available tomorrow. So get your copy, get started with your 6-month plan, as Jeffrey just said. But I want you to sort of talk to this point of, there will be people probably who never read any of his other work that will say, well, why do I want to read this book? The language is antiquated. It's 100 years old. So dispel that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's an old book. Don't buy it. Let your competitors buy it and kick your ass. I think that would be the best thing. And to the authenticity of the book, I didn't change any of Hill's words. I left them exactly intact. That was one of my major purposes and thrusts of this book, to let people see what it was like 100 years ago and how valid it still is today, even though the lexicon might be slightly different. Like big deal. He uses antiquated idiom phrases, and it's a different kind of book. But I explain it. I let people know how they can use it in their life right now, and it's more bankable today than it was 100 years ago, by far.
There's no doubt. And having read his other work, you've kept the capitalization where he has it, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Is all there. So I'm going to say this: if you are a Napoleon Hill fan, if you read Think and Grow Rich,
or anything, the Magic Ladder, the 17 Principles of Success.
Absolutely. Whatever you've read, and if you are a fan, you're going to want to read this. I mean, I was fortunate enough to get one of the very early copies, and I have not read every page yet, but I guarantee you that I will. And you're going to want a copy if you're a fan. But if you're not, or if this is the first time you've really heard of Napoleon Hill, or maybe you've heard of Think and Grow Rich but didn't, for whatever reason, why should people buy the book?
Well, this is the foundational book. This is what caused Think and Grow Rich to be written. And if you own a copy of Think and Grow Rich, you have to buy this book. If you don't own a copy of Think and Grow Rich, this will give you an introduction as to why it's so valuable and why it's so life-altering for you, to add to your understanding of what it takes for you to succeed. What do you have to dedicate yourself to? And in Napoleon Hill's world, there's a mindfulness is like the quote of well, it's not mindfulness, it's concentration. And Napoleon Hill defined it 100 years ago as concentration, as, that's the magic key. And that's the chapter that, when you get he doesn't put it in until near the end of the book, and he goes, oh yeah, this is what it is. You have to concentrate on all the things that I just gave you. And when you concentrate on them, you'll find them coming to fruition. Now, this is why the book is so important today. We live in a society of diversion. You can wake up in the morning and you can shit around for 2 hours before you actually realize, holy crap, I've just shat around for 23 hours. And for 2 or 3 hours, I haven't done anything. I checked my email. I looked at the news. I saw what the weather's going to be. By the way, if you live in Indianapolis, from November until March, the weather is freezing ass cold. Just so we understand.
It's not that bad. Well, there's 4 or 5 days that won't be true.
Yeah, yeah, they'll be minus 20. The other days are just in the 30s. Anyway, the challenge for the reader is that this will give you information that will affirm what you're doing is valid and challenge you for what you're not doing to make it part of your process. And that, I can't be more clear. And it's simple. There's nothing in here that's complex.
There's not. You know, the thing that we talk about a lot in our work, Jeffrey, is timeless principles. And this is the epitome of timeless principles.
Mm-hmm.
There's not anything here about how to manage your email, clearly. There's
nothing
here about how to deal with Facebook, obviously.
Right.
The principles inside of it around concentration, around definiteness of purpose,
yep,
et cetera, are the things that are the principles. And by the way, there are principles in this book, I know, and in Think and Grow Rich that you and I have both written about in different contexts.
Of course.
Times. And 100 other of our colleagues as well. It's stuff that we ought to be, and when we can go back to source, it's always of great value.
The way Hill defines things is just so pleasing. Like, he doesn't call it the law of attraction. He calls it the law of harmonious attraction. Like, build the rapport with someone that you really want to get to know so that you can be attracted to one another. Harmony means doing it together. Manipulating is the bullshit of sales, of finding the pain and all the other crap that's been out there for 100 years, that people have pissed off customers by trying to, quote, qualify them. Just be in harmony with them. Like them. Maybe they'll like you back, because people buy from people they like and trust. And that's part of the deal. But I want you to listen. There's 5 words here that Hill says: imagination, desire, enthusiasm, self-confidence, and concentration are the essence of what you have to do to be successful. Like, how complicated is that? Wait, did you just say imagination? You know, there's nothing there that says, go back and let me hear that word again. What does it mean? No, everyone knows what it means. Now, Hill has definite pieces in there. He talks about depriving yourself of things and, you know, the self-discipline of that. But he's saying deprive yourself of the things that are stupid. Deprive yourself of the things that waste your time. Deprive yourself of morons that you hang around with that can negatively influence your life. That's the deprivation that, you know, you're not giving up potato chips, because I'm not giving up potato chips. I can tell you that right now. I'm not giving up shrimp cocktails at St. Elmo's. I can tell you that exactly right now. And it's not about going on some kind of a diet. It's about depriving yourself of the things that are causing you to not succeed. That's incredible.
I want to tell everybody that's listening, in about 3, because I've already had this conversation with Seth Godin, and he's coming in a few weeks.
Yeah, I love Seth Godin, by the way.
Yeah, we talked about self-discipline, and we talked about how he thinks about it. So there's just a little preview. I'm not going to tell you. You gotta come back and listen when Seth and I talk about it. But it will really go very well with what you just said, Jeffrey. So I hope people will come back and listen. Of course, and if it's way later, you can go listen right away, because it'll already be out there. So I want to shift gears. We've talked about the book, and that's great. And I know that was our main focus, and I wanted us to be able to dive in deep to that. But you are the king of sales, and most people listening here are in one industry or another, are in the business of leadership and leading other folks. So here's my question for you as we start to wind down. I got a couple other things to do, but I want to ask you, so talk to me about the intersection from your perspective between leadership and sales.
I think that they are very closely intertwined, for example. And let's talk about it. I wrote a book called The Little Book of Leadership. And in there, I talked about the fact that leadership in sales is the only measurable piece that you have. Everything else is leadership is kind of, well, I'm going to rate somebody, or I'm going to ask them to give me a 360-degree review that I'm going to ignore. But But the bottom line there is I can measure how many dollars came in as a result of my leadership. And I think that the sales leader has to be the standard setter, the standard bearer for his or her people. If that leader can't go out and make the sale in front of the salesperson that could not, then they are not really the leader. They are the demander. I just had a talk with Bob Berg, the Go Giver guy.
Great guy.
Yeah, and he said, no one's going to buy from you because you have a quota. So when the leader's leader is sticking his foot up your ass about your quota, that's not my incentive to go out and make a sale. And I teach leaders, sales leaders, I say, don't tell people they're not making enough sales. Challenge them that they're not making enough money. Like, dude, you're not making enough money. Let's create a game plan so you can make more money. Because that's what I care as a salesperson. I want to feed my family. I want to pay my mortgage. I want to send my kids to private school. I want a new car. I want a tuition. I don't want to make my number for the company.
Right.
So making your number is a bullshit, erroneous thing. We're going to increase sales by 11.5% this year. Okay. Where did you get that number? Oh, well, we pulled it out of our ass, but the number's 11.5%, and that's what we're going to live or die by. Come on. If you're good in sales, you can double your number. And you can make your quota by the third week of the month instead of waiting for that one last customer to come in. And what this book does is it challenges you to be a better person first.
Yes.
Then you can be a better leader second.
Yeah. Better leader, better salesperson, better parent. We can go right down the road. I think
Exactly. Yeah. My first job is dad. I am a better dad. And I'm a better dad because I qualify myself as a better person first. I can't be a great dad until I'm a great person.
So we're going to shift gears. I've got a second. Jeffrey, I'm going to give you 3 words to respond to, but we call this the fast break. And this is brought to you by our newest book called The Long Distance Leader. If you're leading a
Wait, it's not brought to you by LeBron James?
It is not brought to you by LeBron James. I promise you. The Long Distance Leader. If you're leading a remote team, and if one person is remote, you have a remote team, you can learn more by going to longdistanceleaderbook.com.
Cool.
Here's the fast break, Jeffrey. I've got 3 words. I'm going to give you the word, and I just want you to talk about whatever your reaction to that word, okay? Word number 1 is learning.
It should be preceded by lifelong. Most people don't understand the value of remaining a student. I dropped out of college to become a student. And I realized that I had to learn the lessons of life way before I had to learn the lessons of who the Habsburgs were in Vienna during the 1400s. And maybe it was 1500s, but who really gives a shit? And so I wanted to make sure that once I realized I didn't know anything, like I left home at 20, knowing everything. When I landed in London, I traveled to Europe for my 20th year. I realized I didn't know shit. And so I dedicated myself then to learn one new thing every day, no matter what. Whether it's a new word in a foreign language, or it's a new person that I meet that I learn a little bit about them, or some factoid that I learned that will help me understand others better or to make more sales, whatever it is, or to have a better attitude. I learn something new every day. If you are dedicated to yourself to lifelong learning, I hate to sell this book like this, self-aggrandizing, but this will help you learn 1,000 new things in a week. And I think that's what, I've been a student for the past 45 years, plain and simple. And that will never, never go away.
The next word, you just used my next word in your description there. The next word is attitude.
I have a yes attitude. And I redefined attitude. Once I became a student of attitude, I realized that positive attitude was not enough of a statement. Because when something great happens to you, you don't scream positive. When something great happens to you, you scream, yes! You win the race, you got the hole-in-one, you made the sale, you gave birth to the kid that you wanted to give birth, whatever the circumstance, you got a raise, you got a promotion. And those are mutually exclusive, by the way. Sometimes people get a promotion, but they get no more money. And leaders should understand that. People are, well, they want more than money. Bullshit. They want money and then something else on top of that. But for me, attitude became something. I trademarked the words yes attitude. And I trademarked them because I wanted to make certain that I had a different approach to the positive attitude process. Attitude is so foundational and so fundamental to every single thing that you do that your expressions reveal what your attitude is. So I teach salespeople to do this. I teach them to ask a question about their product to the customer without actually trying to sell it. So for example, let's say I say life insurance. I sell life insurance.
All right.
So Mr. Jones, when I say life insurance, what one word comes to mind? Don't need it. That's 3 words, Mr. Jones. I was hoping for 1. Expensive. Okay, so now I know this person's top of mind awareness, and most importantly, his attitude or her attitude towards it. So I want to
now than you were before that.
Oh, totally. I have defined this person's needs way before I ever ask a question about them.
Yep.
So, I would say, Mr. Jones, everybody hates insurance. Yeah. But everybody needs insurance. Yeah. And most people who have it have the wrong stuff. In fact, 74% of the people that have it have the wrong stuff. Now, I don't know whether I can help you or not, but if you meet me for coffee and you tell me what you have, if I think I can help you, I'll tell you. And if I don't think I can help you, I'll tell you that too. Is that fair enough? Yeah. Now, where'd I get the number 74%?
You probably made it up.
Correct. I made it up. But it sounded good, right?
Sounded
now,
really good.
But if I believe in my heart that I can help that person, I just want to get into a meeting.
Yeah.
And by the way, just from a poll statistic, as you know, the polls are pretty much bogus anymore. Otherwise, we would have had a different president 99% of the time. But I think it's most important for people to have an understanding that the statistic is not as important as the help. I want to help somebody. That's one of my goals. One of my philosophies is I help other people. And if you do that enough, you don't have to get them to help you back. The world will help you back. Totally 100%.
Right with you. 3rd word, persuasion.
I think that persuasion has 2 meanings, both positive and dark. There's all kinds of hypnotic persuasion and all kinds of bullshit about there's been more negative things written about persuasion than positive things. So when I wrote the little green book of Getting Your Way, I decided that it was going to be about positive persuasion only. And I talked about how you write to be persuasive, how you speak to be persuasive, and how you act to be persuasive as part of the overall, self-being. And it has been very successful in terms of a book. I'll send you a copy because it's one of your 3 words. I got it,
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I gave you easy words. I know you'd be able to answer. I didn't give you, I don't know. I don't have another word for you. I only had 3. But I only have a couple more questions for you, sir.
Well, I prefer you call me Mr. Sir, but go ahead.
King Jeffrey.
Go.
What's something that you do? It's pretty clear to me. I've been following you for many years, and even just listening today, it's pretty clear that you love what you do. But what do you do for fun outside of your work?
Well, let me give you a discipline, and then we can talk about the fun. I wake up in the morning and I do 5 things. Sometimes I do all of them. Sometimes I do 1 or 2 of them. But for the last 25 years, this is what I do. I write, I read, I prepare. Those are 3 things that I do. And that causes me to do the other 2, think and create. So that's what I do for fun. Now it's turned into a vocation. But if you get up in the morning and you ignore the bullshit of the world and you read, write, prepare, think, create, you'll make a fortune. That's the number 1 piece. The second thing that I do for fun is travel. I go to Paris at least once a year. Now we're trying to do it twice a year. It's the epicenter of culture in the world. And from there, you can take a train pretty much to any place in Europe, get there in a few hours. So I recommend to people to develop a wanderlust, because what that does is it creates the interest for you to continue to learn. I want to learn about the chateaus. I want to learn about a cheese fondue. I want to learn about a fine wine. I want to learn about the French opera. There's things that you can learn about, ballet, whatever the culture is. And France, Paris is full of culture. I mean, it is the epicenter of culture in the world. There'll probably be arguing, well, Tokyo. I'm like, okay, great. But it's Paris. And I learned one of the most valuable lessons of all from the Eiffel Tower. First of all, when you see the Eiffel Tower, you're blown away. You've seen it 1,000 times in a picture, but when you walk around that corner from the metro, you go, holy shit, there's the Eiffel Tower. What people don't know is it was the most controversial building in the history of the world at that time. 300 of the most prominent French people wanted it torn down when the exposition was over. It is now the symbol of France, the symbol of Paris throughout the world. It is, if there's 5 well-known monuments in the world, the Eiffel Tower may not be number 1, but it's certainly on every list. The Great Wall.
No one's going to think about Paris without thinking of
the Eiffel Tower. That's exactly correct. Or overpriced, rude people. Listen, well, we'll talk about that later. But the challenge is this. In the 1600s, a Finnish guy wrote, no statue was ever erected to a critic, but the people that they criticized, many statues have gone up. And there's the Gustav Eiffel, there's an amazing statue of him at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. And the other 300 guys, I looked all around, I couldn't find one statue of, it's so easy to criticize. It's very difficult to be the man or to be the woman or to be the person that stands up and stands out.
The last question, well, the second to last question I have for you, Jeffrey, is one that most guests, I tell them I'm going to ask this because I just want to make sure they will have an answer. I know you have an answer. I'm sure you do. And I forgot to tell you ahead of time. The question is, what are you reading now, or what's something you've read recently that you think people might want to know about?
I really wish I would have known that question in advance, because I read 4 books at a time. And lately I've been reading Elbert Hubbard, the guy that wrote Message to Garcia. I'm also reading an old book on prosperity, because I want to find out how people thought about it from the early. And the reason I'm not sharing titles and authors with you, you can't find them anyway. But I will tell you that I'm starting a project to scan my library and put it up in a Kindle-like environment and let people subscribe to my library. Because I have about 10,000 books in my library, about 2,500 of which are out of print. They're in the public domain. And you'll be able to come into Jeffrey's library with your library card and read a half a dozen books a month, all about personal development, all about sales that happened, 50 years ago. There's a book called The Fuller Bristler. It is the combined newsletters of the Fuller Brush salespeople. And the one the copy I have is from 1925. It's exactly the same as sales are today. The biography of Alfred Fuller is called Foot in the Door, because he taught his people to, when they knock on the door and the lady opens up the door, stick your foot over the threshold, so that if she tries to slam the door in your face, exactly. So I read older books. Occasionally I'll read a new book. Occasionally I'll read a novel, but I want the novel to be sort of based on some kind of true thing. I'm not a big novel reader, because I like to read facts. So I'm reading books that predate my birth. And I was born in 46, just to give you that concept.
There you go. So now everybody knows how old you are. And
I don't care.
Now we're talking about a brand new book that was written. How about that?
Exactly. A brand new book written 100 years ago. People don't know this, but I'm older than dirt. I'm 72, and somebody gave me some dirt yesterday and said it was 71 years old.
There you go. So, hey, last question for you.
Shoot.
Where can people learn more about you and the work and the book, et cetera? Here's the last chance to go on that.
You can go to Gitomer.com. I think that's the easiest place to go. Or go to Amazon.com to buy the book. That will be very helpful to not just me, but it's the Napoleon Hill Institute project, and they are, keeping up the lifelong work of Napoleon Hill to a point where he's now global. The Think and Grow Rich has sold 100 million copies. it's phenomenal what has happened in the transformation of that. And I think that there's an ability for every person to learn and love from this. So go to Amazon, buy the book, go to my site, Gitomer.com, or come see me. I'm going to be in Atlanta and Dallas and Philadelphia, home of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And
in case you all didn't know where Jeffrey lives, now you know.
Exactly. Well, no, I live in Charlotte. I've lived in Charlotte for 30 years. But when you grow up in Philly,
But
you
you're a
bleed
Philly
green.
guy.
Yeah, you bleed. Like, we're going to play the Colts. You're going to think you're going to win, and we're going to kick your ass. But that's a whole other issue. Yeah.
By the time, we will know by the time people hear this what actually.
Yeah.
I would.
Exactly.
And in this particular case, although I've had Gary Brackett on the show, and he could probably kick both of us easily twice over, I'm not going to make a bet wager with you on that, I promise.
Well, we are going to wager. We're wagering a shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's. We can fight over that check, and you can win.
Oh, there you go. Hey, everybody, I've got a question for all of you before we go. Now what? What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Take from this, because it's not just about being entertained by Jeffrey and by our stories and by learning about a brand new 100-year-old book, but it's about what action are you going to take. And certainly, we would both love for you to go buy a copy of the new book, The First Writings of Napoleon Hill, Truthful Living. However, there were many things that we talked about today that there's action for you to take right away, whether that's something around self-discipline, whether it's around the things that you're going to put in your morning routine. We could go on and on, but my challenge to you is to take action on today, not just listen, because if you do, you get way more than if you don't. So Jeffrey, thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure to have you. I know
it's fun. It's my pleasure. I'd like to leave you with a thought.
Oh.
Most people that I talk to have their library or their office or their, some kind of thing hanging in the background. You have your family. That says everything about who you are as a person.
Actually, on both sides.
Yeah.
So the books are all on the other side of the camera.
Gotcha.
Well, and over here. But listen, hey, thank you for that, Jeffrey. I appreciate that. And
My pleasure.
We're here every week. So why don't you come back to the next episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast?